Happy Friday, everyone. I'm Kyler Cheatham. Happy to have you here. Thanks for joining my live. Today we are talking about, and I'm going to do, topic is tech project restoration. So when I say restoration, a lot of people might call that re-implementation, restructuring, but I call it restoration because I feel like it has a good opportunity to be more positive as opposed to negative. So on these lives, we do Ask Me Anything. So this is an opportunity for you to say, hey, I have this tech project, and we're going through this type of challenge with it, and we can kind of diagnose it live. And if I don't know about it, a lot of people know about it in the comments. I don't know where the topic bubble went, so sorry about that. I'm doing my best here on a Friday. So that's kind of what we're going into. Good morning, happy Friday. And when we talk about restoration, a lot of times it's hard to know like when this is happening or when you need to retake a look at your project and how. So a lot of my goal in this conversation is to make sure you don't get taken advantage by big vendors, especially if you're a larger business and you're kind of struggling. You know, a lot of times we don't do these on a daily basis. So your failure looks like dollar signs to big vendors, right? So I kind of want to take the veil off of that so that you're able to see, you can fully triage your own project, right? And you can also have a lot of positives that come from just taking a look at everything that is not going to be, you know, something that large vendors are going to send you a huge change order and be like, oh, you know, we started at 5 million, now we're at 55 million because you guys couldn't get it together. Your inability, right, to understand what these types of projects look like is not a profit opportunity for another business. So that's kind of what we're talking about today. As always, I have an outline, and we can kind of go through that and really answer any questions that everybody has. So that's what we will kind of do here. If you don't mind just dropping where you're joining from in the comments, I'd love to hear where you're from. A lot of times when we do these early morning lives, we catch a lot of different time zones. So being able to see where everyone's from is always kind of a fun thing. So let's get into it. I think the reason we call it Ontario, nice, Colorado, awesome. Happy to see you guys. Happy to have our Canadians in here as well. They've done a lot of restoration projects, specifically with giving all their money to IBM, but you know, maybe too soon, understand. So when we talk about restoration, we're usually talking about how to rescue a botched ERP project. So SaaS, cloud migration, this could be ERP, which is enterprise resource planning, which is arguably the biggest system you could put in. It could be AI projects. And what we do is go in and make them usable again, right? To make them actually produce some sort of value for the business as opposed to being this huge technical debt and this awful like cultural secret that no one talks about. Because a lot of times when you've done a failed implementation, it's going to make the next implementation 3 times as hard. And that happens a lot in the modern business. We're implementing different things way faster than we would typically 10, even 5 years ago, right? Specifically with like vibe coding and all of those different things. So the first thing we need to look at is kind of the steps of how we make things better and how we take a step back and look what's going on. So what we first do is pause the project. And this is an incredibly important, good morning, important step, right? Because we can't pause and be like, hey, you guys are doing a super shitty job, right? We want to make sure that we can find someone better to do it. And that's not at all what we're trying to do. We're trying to take a step back so that we can see. And a lot of times this is going to be in the form of a health check. I do tell them that. Good. I hope that you do. It's not very Canadian nice of you, though. So, especially from Ontario. Usually it's the Quebecois that get a little bit more spicy, but Well, we like that. We like a spicy Canadian. And the biggest piece of this is understanding where our vendors are at in all of this, right? So we need, before we pause our internal team, we're going to take a health check from our vendors. We're going to say, hey, we need a report on the project so far. We need deliverables. We need all of these different KPIs that you've reached. We need to understand what our budget is and how much we've spent. Vendor risk is crap. Okay, cool. Would disagree highly, respectfully. But this is a point where we understand like how much are we spending and with who. So we've got, usually in these bigger projects, we've got the vendor that's actually selling us the software. That could be the same as the SIs. I think for system integrators, spelling software, the way it's done today is crap. Totally agree with that. On the same page with that, my friend. And so when your SIs are selling you software, that's a huge conflict of interest, right? So they are supposed to be technically integrating and configuring your software to what you want it to be, not what they want it to be, not what's going to get them the biggest kickback. I'm looking at you, SAP, for sales. So you've got to remember that when you're buying it from the same people there, you're implementing it. That in there is crap and it's a huge risk, right? So when we look at that, we need to really sit the SI down, whether you're looking at a bigger SI like Accenture, Deloitte, whatever, right? Or you're looking at a tier 2 SI. What have you delivered today and how much does it cost? How often do projects need to be fixed? Very often, right? We see bigger analysts saying that 60 to 70% of digital transformation fails. Gartner just released one of their other scary reports saying that 80% of AI projects fail to produce value. Well, no duh, because we didn't know what value we were looking for, right? So those stats are inherently biased because, again, they want to profit from your fear and your failure, making you think that you don't understand these projects, so you need to outsource for millions of dollars to other people, which bringing in people to help you is not a bad thing, right? Bringing in vendors that are going to extort you, that is a bad thing, right? And that's where we see a lot of these projects go wrong, especially on the budgeting side, right? For enterprises that they target that over $1 billion, right? They're going to look at how can I get my foot in the door with this very small, ridiculous, honestly, project engagement. And then we are going to have 50,000 change orders, right, involved in that. And all of a sudden it's tripled, doubled, and they blame that on the business. Well, part of that could be the business's fault, but a lot of that is your fault. You're here to, be the specialist and help the business through this as a partner, not just racking up the time and materials over here, right? Land and expand, exactly. Sincerely, when the original expect is badly written and they are fixing is the only way to get value, absolutely. What's the main thing people get wrong is misunderstanding these relationships, right? These people have agendas. It's not because they're terrible people. It's not because we hate them, right? I like to make fun of them in my videos because I want you to see what the actual reality is. So everyone has a different agenda. The vendor's agenda is to sell you software, period. The software that's going to make them the most money, right? And that is going to be something that you need to understand in the sales process. That's why you need to go in. I harp on you guys about demos and contracts because you absolutely need to know what you're buying, right? And not be enchanted by this fantasy they're selling. I'm seeing more if they want it done right. I missed the first one of this. This TikTok format is so hard sometimes. I know you guys know that from the character count. Trying to explain to business leaders what they want can't be done in a week is not possible if they want it to be done right, 100%. And if they want it done in a week, I think like that says a lot about the organization. As I always say, you can't fix crazy, right? If people are going to be insane about this, then they're going to fail, right? And they're going to have to, suffer the consequences of that, right? I am seeing more and more SMBs reach out with rescue projects. I'm so interested in that. Like what type of rescue projects? On the AI side or more on the core technology side. I don't work in SMBs, not because they're bad or anything like that. That's just not my expertise. So I'm curious what you think. SMB, sorry, everyone's like, stop with the acronyms. Stands for small to medium business, right? So those are smaller businesses. Which of the features I see in demos are included in what I'm buying, right? And all of these case studies you're giving me, did they go live with my version, right? In my industry, who implemented the software, right? And are they continue, was it 10 years ago, right? A lot of times getting a big business, they just want that logo on the slide deck, right? We have had 2 people on stress leave and have heart attacks recently on our team, and they don't care. Well, that's incredible. I mean, that sounds like a class action lawsuit in my experience. I have seen people leave with health problems because of these types of engagements, and that's not at all okay. I can't stress that enough. That's incredibly ridiculous. This is a technology project. It's not supposed to, affect your health or your well-being. Case study, how much consulting did it take to get there? Yeah, how much project prep? That's why I really hate the term phase 0, that a lot of times our industry likes to talk about phase 0 like this. It doesn't, all of this prep. I think that absolutely is phase 1 of the project, is documenting your processes, understanding how much money you spend, understanding what you have now, so you're not buying duplicates, especially in this like SaaS craziness of architectures we have right now. We've got 15 systems that do the same thing. That there's so many duplicates in there, but one business unit is playing this because they got a discount because they signed under vendor pressure. And then this other, business unit is playing this, right? And I really appreciate that. In that, please bring me up for 1 minute. I have never let anyone on my lives before. So I would love to talk to you first. Not that I don't think you're amazing, but a lot of times vendors will try and come up here and sell software. I don't think you're trying to do that, but definitely DM me, and I'd love to do something together once we kind of talk about what that looks like. I'm just super protective over our audience and making sure that these are purely for value-driven conversations, which I'm sure you are too. And I just can't be more clear that these have to take tactical triage to go in on. So when we look at these projects, like, when are you there, right? When do you know? And that can be the most challenging piece of this conversation. Of course I am. I'll DM. Good. I hope so. I hope we can do something together. So when do you know that you're there? And a lot of times this is going to come from those what I always say quarterly in bigger implementation assessments. And a lot of this is going to be like an anonymous survey, and you're already going to have an open feedback loop for people to give you feedback. Let's see, I work in the Oracle NetSuite implementing ERP, and I'm seeing failures left and right now. I'm live. I'm so happy you're here. So wait, I thought you said you were an SMB. NetSuite, right? NetSuite could certainly be SMB. I think with NetSuite, the challenge, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, is they try to be everything to everyone. They certainly are not. Me being in a boutique agency in the manufacturing space, right, in complex manufacturing, is I see NetSuite try and bid for those projects all the time. They can't do manufacturing. Even on a small business side, you would need like an MES or something to go along with it. They're a great finance system. I think for SMBs, they're so expensive, right? So when you have nothing and then you go up to, $1 million NetSuite deals, you're like, that is far too expensive, because they only see a lot of times with SMBs one number, right? And that's not the total cost of ownership, especially with the way our subscription fees are working. And don't even get me started on, hybrid pricing with AI and output usage seats. That's insane. Oracle is trying to be everything to everybody. And it isn't. Oracle always. That's been the Oracle way, right? Like you're either Oracle or you're nothing. And a lot of times the Oracle sells, just ask Birmingham City Council how that's going for them. They sell it as like, hey, this isn't off the shelf software that does everything for everything. You will own nothing and you will like it. Absolutely, right? You'll pay for the software that you don't use on a monthly basis. And we see that. I think with Oracle, they sell this idea of like, it's going to be out of the box. And it's absolutely not, right? It's when you have an Oracle or an SAP size client, there's just no way you buy something off the shelf and implement it and you're good, right? Your business is too large, too complex that you're going to be, an ability to understand what that looks like. You're old, but still decent. Thank you so much. Really love the bots on a Friday morning. I hope someone asked me about my weight loss journey in this one too, because it always gets me. Lack of quality data, undocumented business processes, and change management. And I absolutely think that when we do that, we have to understand where the data is. And have you considered GLP-1? Not yet, but I will for you guys. I'll do a full analysis of it, right? This is so funny. I love this shit. So when we look at lack of quality data, I think that's a huge piece. I think someone on our live last week, or no, Tuesday, was like, hey, I had a vendor say I only need 4 years of historical data in my cloud. And I was like, what industry are you in? Because I was on an aerospace and defense panel yesterday at a conference, and we're talking 30 years of historical traceability. And that is so hard, right? Like for DoD contracts or deep space, if you're doing any sort of business deal with NASA, the government, you're going to need massive amounts of quality data. And that just does not exist a lot of times in these organizations. Let's see. All right, so let's talk about how we know, right, when projects stalled. And so there's 3 that I want to go through, maybe 4, right? And so main blockers, leadership. Leadership has disengaged, right? So we started with the project sponsor. This usually happens like a year in, Oracle making the nationals. I can't even say that one out loud because Oracle's all over me blocking, but I see you and I absolutely agree. Leadership is disengaged, right? So the executive sponsor no longer is involved in the project. They're not updating the leadership team. So we're starting to get these terrible questions like, why are we doing this again? And nothing sucks more when you've just been, busting your ass on this project for a year. And then all of a sudden leadership is like, hey, why are we doing this? We have something, or Deloitte told me on the back 9 that we can do this and it's no problem. And you're like, what do you mean, right? What do you mean? So leadership is a huge piece in that when we do project health checks that need to be like re-engaged. And we can talk more about, if you guys want to, how to keep your executive sponsor engaged. And then B is the vendors. The vendors, you've quietly let go of control, right, to the vendors because you think that you're outsourcing to a partner that's going to help you. But now we're going to, they're ghosting, all of these different things. And that's a huge piece of this conversation is they're starting to just bill because they've stress tested you to know that they can do that. Then we have internal politics. And a lot of times this is going to look like a project manager has left or some sort of core project leadership has shifted. It's mostly going to be the PM. Every PM has a different style. And every new PM has to kind of flex on their control of the project and they make changes. And a lot of times that can really set us back, right? And that's a big piece of that. And then I would say my last one is going to be the chaos of business processes and most importantly, requirements, right? We did not do a good job of understanding our requirements, right? And that means we bought something that we didn't need, right? And that's a lot of times when we come into the project, and unfortunately, you purchase that software, we got to make it work, right? We got to make it work. You're in a contract. But, we a lot of times go into businesses that purchased a new ERP system that unfortunately had no idea what they were buying, not because the business isn't smart or a great, healthy business, because these sales processes are again, profit off your confusion. They're going to sell you something that's going to be profitable for them, not that's going to meet your needs if you don't have stacked requirements, right? So those are the 4 things. Would love you guys to add to that list for sure. How much are failed implementations due to misalignment? I would say, it's a huge factor, most definitely. And that's usually going to be from the business and the IT team. They don't have core objectives that they both share, right? The business wants to do something and the IT team's over here like, hey, so that's not functionally possible. It's like when you build a house and, I want to, rip down a wall. And a lot of times my husband's like, okay, but that's like a weight-bearing wall. Do you want the roof to fall in? Right? Like that's how it works in these types of projects. If they don't have a mutual layer of respect and understanding, and a lot of times that's going to start with your PMO, your Office of the Project Management, or Enterprise Project Management, EPMO, a lot of times we call it. And those are going to, thank you so much for the heart fan club. A lot of times that's going to look like bridging the gap between those, right? They speak the technical, they speak the business, but having some sort of buffer between the two that can take everybody's alignment. When I have a tough client, the first thing I'm going to find is my best of the best project manager, right? My holy healing project manager. Thank you so much for the heart puffs. I love these. Conspiracy theories in IT. The moon landing wasn't done with Oracle. So funny. What would you say are 3 red flags in the project that you're going to need restored? I think those ones I mentioned are a big one. And if you're starting to hear rumor mill, this is never going to happen, what's going on at the water cooler, right? Let's see. Red flags in a project: bad specs, bad communication, bad leadership. Where no one can say stop. I think that's such a good addition, right? In this conversation is who is in charge of this. And with digital transformation projects, bridge a lot of different areas. And that is so hard, right? Let's see. I'm trying to go back. You guys are chatty this morning, and I love that. To be blunt, there is a narrow window that allow a project to be restored. Bad leaders, not worth a try. I hear you. I think on that level, when we rescue a project, it's likely going to turn into something else, right? It's certainly not going to be the same of what they thought it was, because their expectations were, either wildly outside of what they thought that they needed. And that a lot of times the vendor, in my humble opinion, should have stepped in and been like, hey, so this software doesn't do that. And we can definitely sell you something that does, right? But as my colleagues always tell me, that's hopes and dreams thinking. Thank you so much for the gift. That's so nice. I appreciate you guys. And you're right, subordinates who hide stuff. And that happens a lot of times, especially if we don't have a culture or even a mode to report things anonymously in the project, which it could just be a survey link or something like that. Because a lot of times we don't know as a leadership that these projects are in trouble. Is that on leadership to be more involved? For sure, right? But it's also the project team doesn't want to say that this project is failing, right? Let's see. The same way bad decisions by leadership, pretty PowerPoint and someone, right? Let's see, someone else writing requirements. Well, I really appreciate your first gift. That's so nice. I wish I understood more. I get on TikTok and talk about these types of things. I don't at all do it for the money. I do it so that I don't make any money on TikTok. Just want to be super clear on that. But I come on here because I think that we need to change as an industry, right? And we need to end this sastortion as I made up that word yesterday. I'm really proud of myself. And the SaaS mafia, right? Like the amount of times I see these business getting shaken down by like this system integrator owns your custom integration. What do you mean you own their custom integration? So that they can never not do business with you. That's mafia shit right there, right? That's shaking you down on the block. And I fundamentally and like on a cellular level cannot support that. So are they ever truly anonymous? Yes, absolutely. They can be anonymous. They absolutely can be anonymous. And how that looks like from a functional perspective is you have a feedback link that it's not even tied to a department. Could you, from an IT perspective, really go in and look at like the VPN that sent you that? Maybe, but that's not what you want to do, right? You want full anonymous feedback. And that could even be like all of these different things. And then it goes to usually the project management. It could sometimes go to the change team, but if you know me, I'm not a huge fan of change management outside the project management function. Change management and project management should live together. They should not be in HR, because then once we get that type of stuff in HR, it gets weird. All right, don't come for me, HR people. You have your role, right? But it's not a technical project role, and they are truly anonymous, right? So let's see. Is AI going to cut down on how long implementations take? So they can, right? So some use cases for AI that I've seen work really well, right, are testing, right? But they need to be overseen, right? So go in, click this button, make sure this button works, and then give me a log on, what you're doing, right? So there is some testing AI that I feel like is helpful. I think there's possibility that it could cut down on how long it takes, but we cannot skip the important steps, right? We can't skip understanding all of the integrations, right? We've gone from like a IT department that oversees core systems to a lot of times that's outsourced, right? And they still need to be very much involved in that, but their whole job is to oversee integrations, right? Because there's so many of them, right? We have so many systems in our stack. We need to make sure that the data and integrations are helpful. So I think that's a tough question. I don't think we should be in the mindset that it's going to cut down on it, but we also shouldn't be in the mindset of like, we can't use AI at all, because, that's just holding you back. Let me put it this way. It is not going to cut down on the hard work that it takes to do a successful technology implementation, right? When a client sends a list of project deliverables, they are clearly just using Copilot copy and paste. Well, that shows a very uninformed client, right? Copilot can help with that stuff. Like, don't get me wrong. But I think I would feel sympathy for a client like that, because clearly they don't understand what they're buying, and they're at a huge risk of getting taken advantage of, because vendors can sniff that out, faster than anything. So, let's see. Still need a human in the loop. But documented business process can assist. That's a good use case for AI too. I think process mining, I said in 2025, it's the year of process intelligence, not artificial intelligence. And I think that's a huge piece of it. Let's see. How frequently should projects be pressure tested or audited? I think audited every quarter. Especially if you have a bigger implementation, is usually the cadence I see. Pressure tested is a whole another subject in that. When we're looking at like an AI agent, that pressure testing should be done very frequently if the agent is not behaving in the way that you need it to. And that takes a very, savvy operator to look at. So the way that we talk about manufacturing operations and being an AI operator, that pressure testing is something that should be done before it's implemented, right? We call it red line testing a lot of times. We do that a lot with robots and machinery, because they're in cages because they'll, kill someone, right? Or guess I shouldn't say that on the internet. I don't know what I'll get in trouble for on TikTok, right? let's see. Using AI should be an afterthought rather than the main reason you're doing something. Absolutely. And as we talk about a lot of times in these implementations, it is boring. It is the boring part of the project. And we've seen, like, back to Oracle, I was evaluating an architecture the other day, and they have 30,000 agents in there just to say they have agents, right, in their conversation. And it's like that's not helpful, right? It might be helpful to some clients, but we don't need to use every single agent just to say we're using agents. If it's helpful, use it. If it's not, don't. If you don't have someone to oversee it, it's not going to take a seat in your business, right? So I'm going from IT to policy analyst. I hope to get into tech policy and governance. I think that's awesome. Very cool. Are you in the States, or are you in Canada, or where are you in the world? Very curious to know. Let's see. Or you could just implement a good data observability and quality solution. I mean, you could, right? But you got to know where the data is, right? We do a lot of QMS work, right? Because we, work in so heavy manufacturing. And a lot of times those solutions are misunderstood for having a good process, right? There's only so much technology can help you on quality management if, right, you don't have the ability to know what type of quality you're looking for, right? How do you go about cleaning your data before switching systems? I mean, you can use AI to help with that, right? But you have to know where your data is and what you're looking for, right? And so when we a lot of times this is a misinterpretation. I'll take the example I gave at the beginning where a vendor told you only need 4 years of data in the cloud. Well, that's because they were trying to get you in the cloud on the subscription faster, right? The minute you sign on that dotted line, you are paying those subscriptions. And so if you lift and shift, right, just bad data into the cloud, it will continue to give you bad results. It's not that deep, right? But when we look at data from that perspective, I usually say a whole year of looking at not only where is your data, not only is it clean, did you scrub it, and did you remove the duplicates, all of these different things. Do you understand where it might be in these disparate systems that you had no idea was there, that are heavy for? My colleague yesterday on aerospace and defense was like, don't say the B word, Kyler. And are you at risk for a breach, right? Because a lot of times when you say that, especially in heavily compliant industries, then there's reporting that you need to do. So we might have had an escape, but we didn't have a breach, okay? So when we look at that type of thing, you got to know all of those different pieces, and that's only 20% of it. How are we going to keep the data clean and compliant going forward? And that takes data stewardship, ownership, different hygiene habits in the organization and processes. AI can help or hurt depending on how it's used. Couldn't agree more, right? You've got to understand what type of AI you're using. I mean, still to this day, so many executives sit in front of me and like, what should I do with AI? It's like, okay, that's not really the question, right? What pain points do you have in the business, and how can AI help you with that, right? In my view, this depends on the impact of AI and what's being used for. Absolutely. I'm talking more about setting guidelines on what data is relevant and then making sure it doesn't drift. Absolutely. Couldn't agree 100%. And a lot of that drifting is going to happen with those AI agents too, right? What does that look like? And it doesn't happen like immediately. Like, I think a lot of people think that when you're evaluating or observing an agent, it's going to be like this big like bzz, bzz, bzz alarm that goes off right when the agent does something that's not supposed to. And a lot of times that's not how agents work, right? They can drift in and outside if they don't correct themselves, right? Then we need to reprogram something, right? Data, that's a good one. Thank you, Mick. Data definitions never hurt. Absolutely. Because you might define data like, this one data point in one word or one way, and then another department defines it in another way. So you're really talking about the same thing, but you don't know that you're talking about that standardization. So having those data definitions that people can access and learn, huge part of training. Great resource there. Sorry. Woo! If you don't follow Mick, shameless plug, you should absolutely. He's one of the younger professionals on our team. He does a lot of great Gen Z content, if you will. What industry are you mainly rolling out in these implementations? Resource, health, sales, etc. So when we do implementations, we're typically doing an enterprise-wide or a manufacturing production implementation. So that would look like an ERP implementation that touches all of those, right? And then manufacturing execution system implementation, which again will touch a lot of those as well, but is mostly going to be in production and manufacturing. So when we look at what industries are we serving, we're a boutique agency that does complex manufacturing. So metals, mining, aerospace and defense, biopharma, all of these different pieces that they have a very complex manufacturing process that looks at robotics and a lot of different pieces. We also do some public sector, and then because they also are complex, and then we do a lot of vendor advocacy work, right? So sitting alongside a Deloitte or a Accenture, a big system integrator, and making sure the client is getting what they need, right? So thank you, great question. Is there an a minimum viable level of data readiness before go live? Totally depends on the system, but yes, absolutely. It depends on where you're going. How do you justify to leadership spending a year on data prep? I think you look at what happens if you don't, right? And you have to showcase that in the business case, and that always has to come back to economic awareness, right? If we spend X money on this system for a year, this is how much we're spending. If we don't have any idea of what we're doing, because this is our current state and we looked at that in the business case, then we're losing this amount of money because we don't have the data ready to go. Could we, expand upon this and lower it to 6 months? For sure, but we need outside help to be able to do that. And remember, it's like letting someone go through your underwear drawer when you give someone your data, right? It's a very, very risky thing to do. Can people come in and give you data habits and hygiene? Yes, but as an organization, if you're going to be a healthy organization, you need to make sure that you understand your data. How should a company go about deciding whether it's right to switch, reinvent their MES or ERP systems? So this is my jam. If anyone were to ever ask me a question, this would be it. So I'll give you a client example that we have right now. When we came in, their ERP system is critically flawed. Like it could go down at any minute and shut down their production line. It's not a situation where they don't like it. It's old and crusty and dusty and they can't get the reporting from it. Because a lot of times when we go in, we're not going to recommend a new system. You got a lot going on here, and the last thing you need to do is get in a SaaS contract that you're stuck in forever. And so the difference between an MES system and an ERP system is going to be an enterprise resource planning system, right? So it's supposed to be kind of the core, the heartbeat of the organization. But when you're a heavy manufacturing industry or a business, an MES system, a manufacturing execution system, is often what you need. So we went in with this one client. They had bought D365 as an ERP system before we even got there. Not a terrible choice, right? Because their ERP system was terribly flawed. They were doing an agile implementation. But in going through, looking at it, we settled on you actually need an MES system. Like there's a lot in here that simply we cannot do without over customizing your ERP system. That's going to be expensive, and you don't have the internal competencies within your IT team to handle these customizations. Does that mean you can't build that out? Absolutely not. But we got to go with the best option. So we looked at the MES system because they had so many needs on the manufacturing execution side, and layered on with the MES specific, industry-specific localized agents. And I'm talking about manufacturing in aerospace and defense, that you can't have just a lot of agents running around in your manufacturing floor that are built by Claude, right? We need localized agents that are security permitting to be able to be within those pieces. So if you're a complex manufacturing and you're going through a new core system evaluation, you need to take a look at an MES, right? If you're a small to medium-sized business, it might be overkill for you, but if you're in complex manufacturing, it absolutely is something that you need to take a look at. So I hope that helps. Agents are going to do something wrong, full stop, 100% of the time, right? And that's a big piece of that conversation, right? How do you feel about AI operators, people that focus on learning processes first before any changes? I think that's 100% what you need to do. So AI operators, or we often call them system operators, just because AI is, it could be many different things, right? Do we need a ChatGPT operator? Probably not, right? Do you need one if you have a massive predictive analytics agent in your production line? For sure. You probably need three or four for the night shift, for the day shift, right? So that's why I struggle so much with the term AI, right? We talked about data definitions, like what are you talking about, right? And so I absolutely think that that's for sure to go. Mick feels great about that. Thoughts on Acumatica? I think Acumatica is a great system for maybe a small to medium size manufacturer. I think there's a lot that Acumatica can't do, but one thing I'll say about them is I do think that they are very focused on listening to their customers, right? So for an ERP system, they're great. That NetSuite conversation we had earlier, Acumatica should be included in that, right? They should be evaluated around. They're going to be way less expensive, but you're not going to be able to do as much functionality. NetSuite's going to be bigger than that. Should data quality be tied to roles and accountability in the business? Yes, absolutely, right? You need to set those standards and expectations. That's why we have data owners. If this data is a hot mess, who was the data owner that needs to make sure it gets in the system this way? I mean, do we need to fire him? No, there needs to be like a conversation though. Are you not understanding what's going on? What's the problem here? Like in any other problem, when we have expectations around roles. Hell yeah, thanks Kyler. Mining, resources, ERP here, feel the complexity of those issues. I was on an aerospace and defense panel yesterday. We do a lot of mining. In that conversation, we had a coal mine out of Utah come up to us and be like, we are just so confused about like what we should be doing. And that's so true. Mining and even renewable energy has been a big thing in that conversation. Metals is huge. Obviously, we have a huge metals practice here that we build AI agent just for metals, but because it's so complex, it likely needs an MES with things over it, right? Things built into it depending on, what you're doing in that conversation. Let's see. My wife is listing and she just built versus bolted is going to make a real difference. Listening. And she said built versus bolted. She sounds very smart. I actually just did a video on that yesterday. And built is something you're renting the cloud already, right? Like you're renting the cloud. If you give away your internal capabilities, then that's going to be something that's another risk when it comes to AI in your organization. Build versus buy for agents, right? I don't think that you can do that. A lot of people come to me being like, I want to build an ERP system. Good for you, right? If you have the capabilities in-house to do that and manage it, that is a huge undertaking. AI agents, build them, right? So your wife is very smart. Good job marrying her. Is our weekly touch point? Yes. When are you going to get here? I've been waiting for you. I have the Q2 proposals from Deloitte and they need 43% more. Wow, only 43%. That's amazing, right? It's going to be a very cheap restoration touch point. Good job, Mary. Yeah, she sounds very smart. So let's talk about how much these should cost you. So a lot of people, I forgot the zero, 430%, right? So let's go into that. Let's pick up on this. How much should these cost you? So typically, right, and this is a very ballpark estimation. Like we have these questions all the time of like, how much is this going to cost us? So usually, right, your implementation is going to cost about 3 times more than your licensing fees. And that's a big consideration of like, what are you licensing, right? So that's a big, broad look at that. When we look at a restoration project, that's going to cost about 5 times more than your original implementation project because of those redesign, re-resource, re-implement. All of those are going to be way more expensive than doing it right. So the person that asked about like, how do I tell my executive team that I want to spend a year on data? Well, you give them these right? If we don't do this, it could potentially cost us, due to industry data, not just mine, right? Mine would probably be about 10 times more, right? And I think that's going to be a critical piece to understanding like what is the risk of not doing this from a data perspective or from building your agent perspective. You should have those competencies in-house. If I hear one more time that a software engineer cannot be an AI engineer, I'm going to lose it, because that's not true whatsoever. If you have software engineers, these are some of the most highly skilled people in your organization. You need to invest the time in giving them the resources that they need, right? And that's a huge piece of use what you have internally. For that client, I gave you the MES versus the ERP. For the MES system, we didn't recommend they buy a new one. They have one, right? The licensing was wrong. They're going to need to re-implement a lot of different pieces of that, right? Is it going to be easy? No. But does it mean they need to go out and rip it all out? We're not in those ages of like rip and replace anymore, right? There's a lot we got going on for us where we don't need to spend that type of money to go out and buy something totally new. And then when we buy something totally new, we're now in that hybrid pricing that drives me crazy, right? Where we don't understand how much we're buying. And that hybrid pricing, when I say that, is we're not only looking at SaaS fees, right? We're looking at users, we're looking at seats, we're looking at output, right? Output. So, when you have these complex answers for an AI agent, they're taking up that output, right? And you're being charged by output, which you could have no idea how to estimate that, right? And it's incredible. You'll just get the bill, right? And people are signing these contracts under the pretense of like, this is AI. And now it's in the core licensing of Salesforce or, Oracle or whatever else, because it's wants to be tied to your critical function. That's what we call the AI tax, right? So let's see. I told them best we could do is 350% more. I've saved the company so much money. You're a true hero. You're a true hero. I'm not trying to plug, but the company I work for accelerates all of this. I'd love to hear more about that as well. Definitely not thinking you're trying to plug, but we could all use more of that, right? I buy stuff without knowing what I buy, right? It's like going to the grocery store and closing your eyes and feeling things on the shelves and then bringing them to the cashier and having no idea, right? Wait, you're my prof for financial reporting. I recognize you. I wish, right? I'm not qualified to be a prof for financial reporting in any way, shape, or form. So don't think that. Do people talk about the look of an ERP system versus the functionality? Absolutely. Absolutely. 9 times out of 10, someone will come to us and be like, we need a new ERP system. We'll be like, why? And they'll be like, well, everyone hates it. It's like, okay. Well, what do they hate about it? It's old. Our young professionals don't like it. Cool. Well, grow up and welcome to corporate life, right? So, I mean, it should be a consideration. I'm being facetious in that amount. If it looks like a crusty, dusty old system, that is a consideration. Does that mean you need to spend $10 million replacing it just for that? No, right? There's things that you can work on to make sure that it's more beautiful, right? You can have a business intelligence layer over that. But ripping out an ERP system is a huge project. Not only is it going to cost a lot, it's going to disrupt the shit out of your business, right? And it's a huge risk, right? Where's the line between, lost it. Where should the line be between IT and OT for who's responsible for MES components? Who should own that? That's a really hard question to answer without, seeing the organization. But I think I am of the thought process that IT should own all of the functionality of all the technology, right? people will come back and be like, well, what about the business? Well, what about this? IT, if you're not going to let them do their job. But that said, they cannot hoard that, right? And a lot of traditional IT departments will take it down in their basement and cling to it for dear life. So if you have an IT department that does that, right, then it needs to go to more of an operations role or role in the business. I think you can fix that, right? We go in and fix a lot of IT departments that, buy all the software and all of a sudden they're like, we don't know how to do any of the IT components of this type of new, and that's fine, right? You can fix that, but I think that really depends on the business, and it takes a very reflective leader to be like, okay, can our IT team handle this and be a partner to the business? Is a big one. Miss Smarty Pants wife, AI doesn't fix problems, it exposes them. Love her, so obsessed with her. Task, S4 versus old ERP. Is it an SAP? SAP, right? Is it an SAP ERP, right? I think that would be a big consideration in that conversation. So if it's not an SAP product, then we're learning a whole different language, right? And that's a big, I'm trying to plug. Deloitte is my hero company. Good for them. Mass extraction. Oh my gosh. Let's see. If you don't change how data is created, isn't data cleanup just a temporary fix? For sure, right? If we're not looking at those behaviors. And that's why it takes a year. That's why I'm saying a year to do this, because 20% is cleanup, right? The rest of the 80% is fixing how the organization and process operates in getting to that data. How do you ensure that it's all correct? Because we could spend millions and millions making sure our data is fixed and then all of a sudden just go right back to the starting line. I love terminal look for end users, give them a green screen. We talk to many businesses, especially the AI crazy ones. They're like, yeah, we want AI agents all over the place. It's like, sir, you have a 30-year-old green screen. So we've got some work to do before we get there. Love the energy, right? Let's see. I'll send you a LinkedIn request. Would love that. Oh, and by the way, I'm so bad at this. We go live on LinkedIn after this. So a half hour after this, we'll go live on LinkedIn. So if you want to be so legit and professional, then go over to join us on LinkedIn. It's a fun conversation. Imagine if we took a cow to a farm and tried to teach it to live like a bird. Would it work? Perfect, right? And that's exactly what you're asking in these systems, right? And that is not possible, and the faster that you can get to that conclusion, the better it is. I love when IT holds a company hostage, a real joy, right? And some IT departments do this. We're working through this with a client right now where IT's starting to come to the table. We have to remember, these VPs of business system, they've been in that IT team for 30 years. This is the only way they know how to do things. So they either change and get with the program because now they're in a leadership level and have that trickle down, or, right, they do that, but they, don't. And the systems now need to live with the business because IT can only answer tickets and fix computers. And that, unfortunately, is a real reality. It doesn't have to be, right? Because these are some of the most talented, skilled people you have in IT, and you're only using them for, a minuscule piece of your business. And that's hard. It's SAP. Try not to get you banned. Don't they shadow ban me? I mean, they have my entire career. I always say to my SAP colleagues, I'm not hard on you. All that I'm asking you to do is not extort your customers. I feel like that's a very valid and not too much to ask. Please don't lie to your customers. That's it. That's all. All right. That's it. And don't create a problem in the marketplace that you then have to fix with your own products, and they have to spend more money with you. That's hello rise, right? Nothing quite like being told you can't access the system you need to do your job because it's not on the roadmap, right? And I'm going to just, for a minute, right, look at this from IT's perspective. Why are they like this, right? Did the business mistreat them? and not bring them to the table. So they've just kind of siloed back, because the business probably has some overall understanding of how that happened as well, right? So let's fire them quick. And then IT gets mad when shadow IT happens. Absolutely. Excuse me, we're only here to extort them. We have shareholder value to make. Exactly. And we're going to put AI agents in everything now and charge you for even the ones that you don't use, right? Can you plug yourself quickly? I've never seen. Absolutely. Right. So my company is called The Confluential. It's a business system architecture company that specializes in complex manufacturing. So metals, mining, biopharma. We do some food and beverage. And again, we've gotten involved with the public sector a little bit because Deloitte is trying to shut down their door. And so we do a lot of advocacy where we sit beside them just to make sure that contracts are good to go. When it comes to actual specialized agents, we build those and deploy them within usually our metals or our aerospace and defense area where they need high security agents. So we have some that are like the catapult that we deploy. We have a rolling agent for our aluminum agents. And again, that their data is their business, right? We help them go in, deploy it. They own it. We don't own it, right? And that's a big piece of why these localized agents are so important, but it's called The Confluential. You can go to theconfluential.com if you would like to learn more about it, or you can DM me. Again, these lives, the reason I don't often mention it is because it's not about me. It's about giving a space for us to have these conversations about where are we going with our technology strategy without anyone trying to sell them things. And that's why on these lives, I don't let anyone come up just willy-nilly. I will always share expertise when you guys DM me and we can do something together. But that's exactly when. So give one example of successful agent use case for A&D manufacturing. Absolutely. So we have what's called a catapult agent, and what that does is it measures temperature, or it can really measure anything that you want it to measure, but temperature I feel like is the easiest example. So when we're melting metal for plane wings, right, we have an agent that goes in and measures the variance of these temperatures. So think about these bigger machinery pieces that has, stew that's been on the manufacturing line for 30 years. And he knows when these different variances are going to swing back. So we don't need to stop the whole production line and swing them back. So the catapult, right, think about, this is why we named it. When you pull something back and you launch it in a catapult, it has different variations. Wind, the pullback angle, how far in the distance. And this same agent does the exact thing. So it's measuring these, but it's between different variances of being able to be pulling it back to the right temperature. So it might go to, a certain degree Fahrenheit or Celsius that it's not supposed to. And as long as it pulls back within those variances, you can completely outsource that. And it's not like we need to shut down the production line every single time that the metal is too hot. So hopefully that's a good example. Happy to explain that to you. I have more on my TikTok page as well. And so when we look at those agents, we build them in collaboration with our partners. They own them, and we do all of that knowledge transfer. They're all localized, right? They're not run by Claude or another agentic system. There's no, subscription fees and those types of things. Is Sage Intact big in America or Europe because it's failing here in South Africa? Yes, absolutely. It's big here. I would say, again, it's the same conversation as Acumatica. It's a good for SMB, but I'd love to hear more about what you're talking about. A lot of people have asked me about Sage of late. I don't work a lot with them because I focus on bigger enterprise. Usually our company services $1 billion and above. That's just the best fit for our expertise. But I'd love to hear what's going on in South Africa. And just a quick plug for South Africa. I learned from my colleagues that we don't say "how's it" to clients. That's like saying "what's up, bro" in American. And I often put my cultural foot in my mouth with my clients all the time because, I am the dumb American in the room. There we go. We need to discuss the lack of Kit Kats in this round playable. Yeah, Steve, if you have more questions about it, definitely that's our catapult agent. We also have an aluminum rolling agent that I can, explain to you as well. That said, I have to go. I love these lives. I'm so glad we're doing them on Friday mornings now. But this has been such a great conversation. I just want to remind you guys that it's just as much about what you know as I know, right? That's why you have these conversations in the comments so that people can be like, oh, like I might not have to do exactly what Oracle says. I might be able to kind of own my strategy, build my agents, really understand what that looks like. And all of these different pieces, because technology strategy is as unique as our own human DNA at this point in 2026, right? For the modern company. I want you guys to know that so you don't get taken advantage of and your project doesn't fail. So you never have to call us for a restoration project. And, you can implement stuff in a healthy business. So with that, I will be live in a half hour on LinkedIn. And I go live every Tuesdays and Thursdays. I think I'm traveling next Tuesday, so I'm going to, I live in rural Colorado, but I judge all of the innovation grants for the Department of Economics here on the state level. So I'm going down to hear all of those pitches for new SaaS products, which I'll bring back and tell you guys about. It's really interesting. But that said, so I'm not sure what the lives will look like, but I always do 2 weeks. So definitely Friday morning I'll be here, but I'm not sure about Tuesday, but you can always find the lives on my profile. So thanks, friends. Great conversation, and I will see you next week. Bye. Or on LinkedIn. Come on over. It's boring over there. I need you.